Got it. As you can see, Prague takes very, very good care of their museum equipment. You could basically eat off of them. Later on, we were waiting on the side as this regular car came along on the 19, another one of the former Soviet Union T3s that was sent to Prague. This is the southwesternmost tram line, again on the west side of the river. Lubochepi, something like that. And we came back to the depot for, I think this was the lunch break, actually. Oops, sorry. After the trip, there's most of the ERA group waiting to board regular service to go back to our hotel. If you can see my cursor, there's Charlie Akins, may he rest in peace. Walter Zulig, Dennis Furbush. I'm just Dave Perman, Julian Wolf. A lot of recognizable characters. And of course, while we're waiting there, since the sun is perfect, we have to photograph the regular service. Yet another variant, T3P. And then after the fan trips were done, a lot of us marched around the Prague Castle. Very historic, very old, very pretty. I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to say how old, but possibly from the Middle Ages. This particular basilica is from sometime after 1142, a long time ago. Little houses outside the Prague Castle. That was a shop owner, not a lady of the evening. The view from Prague Castle. So this is looking due east. And that's the old town just on the other side of the river. Looking northeast. Prague is a very, very pretty city. And the fact that it was never bombed is a good thing. This is the famous long, and I mean long, staircase up to the castle. You really want to take the tram up to the castle and walk down the stairs. The next day, May 19th, we boarded might have been this train for our next day's activity. It's a Type 30E electric built by Skoda in '57. So it's been around, as you can see, kind of worn looking and could use a paint job. And this is at the main railway station. Hlavní nádraží essentially is main station. Turned around to face the other way as a Slovak Railways train came in from the other direction with a Type 55E, also built by Skoda, but much later in '74. So the trip this day was to ride the Bechyně Railway. As you may have noticed from the meeting notice, this was the first electrified railway, not only in what became Czechoslovakia, but apparently the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in 2003, they were celebrating, it just so happens, their 100th anniversary. So they pulled out their 1928 Ringhofer electric locomotive for our trip. We really wanted to ride this, the 1903 Ringhofer EMU that inaugurated the electric service 100 years ago. But they were still working on it. It wasn't quite ready for us. As you can see, though, it looks like they had done the painting. Absolutely beautiful. And this is in Tabor, where the branch line joins the main line. So they pulled it out for us for photos, but unfortunately we didn't get to ride it. But at least we saw it. Of blessed memory, Jim Mattina in the cab of the electric locomotive. This is up at the end of the line. We could crawl on the equipment, go in the cab. They didn't care. Just don't do anything silly. Speaking of the cab, there it is. Nifty master controller. Coming back down the line, we had, it's a single track line. So we met at the passing siding in the middle of the regular service. It's probably a road switcher. I mean, it looks just like a yard switcher, electric locomotive, but evidently it's not. And it's funny seeing a single bi-level and a single level combine. Pretty light duty for this branch. When we got back off the fan trip on the main line, they hooked up a quote, a mainline electric locomotive. This one, it's a type 51E, to the two coaches, ancient coaches that we had used on the branch. And they took us in the old coaches back to Prague. Unfortunately, there was some kind of a power outage, maybe storm related. And I think we sat here for a couple of hours. We didn't get back into Prague until it might have been like 11:30 p.m., possibly later. It was a very long day. It was great though. Now I remember. Before we did that though, we took the train down to České Budějovice to tour the Budweiser brewery. And this, of course, is the real Budweiser, not the one from St. Louis. This is the original one. And of course, it's much better. We had a dinner there, tour of the brewery. Very interesting, spotless. There's Jim Mattina with our tour guide. And then we had our big dinner in the brewery's restaurant. In the back under the painting, the photograph is Dave Shore, may he rest in peace. There's Charlie and Harold Golk and Dennis Furbush and Noah Kaplan and Jim Mattina. A good time was had by all. And needless to say, the beer was incredibly fresh. Did I skip that? Oops, okay. This is getting, the next day. So it was after the brewery tour, going back to Prague, where they had the power failure and we got back in very, very late. But we were all very happy customers, so it didn't matter. This is the next day, May 20th, and we're hopping on the train. This is at the other station in Prague, Holešovice. One of the other stations. There's three kind of main railway stations. And this is a Slovak National Railway locomotive. It was fairly early morning, so we had breakfast in the dining car, and it was a Eurocity, the Chardas, on our way to Brno. So there's Jim Mattina and Ned Fox. And yes, it's after 9 a.m., so it's okay to have beer with your breakfast. Brno has I guess it's the second largest tramway system in the Czech Republic. Not all of these lines are tramways. The solid lines are. The dashed lines are trolley buses. It's a very, very interesting system. And there's our fan trip train. The single truck motor looks much older than it actually is, having been built in 1943. It's interesting that it's got the wood paneling. The trailer is much, much older, having been built by Ringhofer in 26. This is just outside the main railway station, Hlavní nádraží. So our first photo stop is out at Zemědělská turning loop. It wasn't raining all day long, but it was a wet day. To get this photo stop in the middle of a street, we did hold up traffic a while. The crew was very, very cooperative. Wherever we wanted to stop, they stopped. So here you could see two versions, the same basic type of T3s, both in regular service on the 4 route. The one on the left is a newer modification with electronic signs and an air conditioner for the cab, not for the passenger compartment, and in the newer Brno paint scheme. It's interesting, though, that the car that was modified more recently is quite a bit older. 1966 and still running perfectly fine. This photo stop was under one of the railway lines. Once we got outside the downtown area, traffic was no longer an issue. Back downtown, Malinovského Square. Náměstí is Czech for square. Beautiful architecture, as usual. And yes, it is raining here. Yet another square. This particular square actually does not have regular tramway service. It's only for special moves or diversions. You'll notice that the tram stop on the left over there has no route information on it. And because there was no regular service, we could sit there as long as we wanted. So people were able to get pictures from all over the place. There we are on the other end of the square. There's Charlie Aikens on the left. Way out at the outer end of one of the routes, typical, fairly modern communist era apartment blocks. Shvermova is the terminal name. Another turning loop at Mendlovo Square. This is a rather rare, in the scheme of Tatra's complete set of equipment that they ever made, the K2s are rather rare. They were their first articulated cars. And it's basically two T3s on a common truck in between. What's neat about it, though, is the corrugated sides that make it look like it was built by Bud under license, which it was not. At the Pisarchy Loop, we had the benefit of being undercover for a change. This was right outside the Pisarchy depot, and we were able to once again wander all over the place and photograph to our heart's content. ERA member Yuri Maller explained to me what the manufacturer SBEPD stands for. It's a very long name. Suffice to say that this single trucker was built in 1954, and it is a Type 4MT4. It's the only one on the roster. Though it's here in work service, this is a very rare Tatra T2, built in 1958. The T2 was Tatra's second PCC car. The T1, which you'll see later, was their first PCC. This one, well, like I said, it dates from 1958. It's fairly early. You'll see later on that when we went to Ostrava, that there were still T2s running in regular service. And in fact, we had a fan trip with them. So there is a really nicely rebuilt K2, now known as a K2P, pretty late, 1977. You'd really never guess that it was that old. An even more modernized version, this I think had just been rebuilt in the past year or two, and looked very, very modern, even though it was originally built in '74. I always love the opportunity to go marching around car barns. Of course, in the digital film, in the digital camera era, all you have to do is pump up your ISO a little bit, and lighting is usually not an issue. So here's a whole assortment of K2 articulated cars from the gamut of years, 83, 75, 74, different paint schemes, some advertising. Back out on the road, and we were lucky to be able to capture this with a 1999 Skoda 21TR trackless on the left. I mean, that was only 4 years old. Multimodal. Here we are at the end of the 11 route. After not seeing K2s ever, all of a sudden, that's all we were photographing. And this one does not have the corrugated sides. Actually, the others in the car barn didn't either. That might have been very rare. So yet another type is a later version of Tatra's, well, I guess the second variety of articulated car from Tatra was the KT8. And this one was fairly new, 1990. This is secondhand from Košice in Hungary, Slovak Republic, excuse me. Back near Pisarchy again. And back at that big square that does not have regular service, by now the rain had stopped and the sun was beginning to come out. Another multimodal shot. Yet another variety of K2. And I think this is just before while we're getting ready to return to Prague. So we're outside the main railway station where a lot of the tram lines go by. So here's an example of a Tatra product meant for another country, a K2YU for Yugoslavia. Another modernized K2. The following day was a free day. Some of the guys went to Pilsen. Originally, we were supposed to have fan trips in Pilsen, but a lot of the system was being rebuilt, and they could not provide us with any of the, they could not accommodate us. I now regret not making the day trip with some of the other guys to Pilsen. I spent the day in Prague, which is not hard to do. Some of it was on the metro, like here. This is at the Rajská Zahrada station on, I guess this is line 2. Typical Russian subway car, Metro Wagon Mash, from 1986. Same location. Very modern station. Out in the burbs, big box retail, it could be anywhere. This is one of my favorite places to photograph. This is a little east of downtown, Palmovka. This is a Grand Union, one of the few. And you could stand in one spot for a half an hour and get trams coming at you from every which way. So here's one of the 1990 KT8s in its original paint scheme. Looking down the other street, a pair of T6s. You gotta love this. Two of my favorite beers in the world. Of course, they're both from the Czech Republic. And this is Wenceslas Square, which used to have lots of trolleys in it, but after the metro was built, the trams were removed. There are plans now to put trams back in Wenceslas Square. Not far from that square, we see a pair of T3s going by on the 4 route. And oh, look, museum trams. This was not our fan trip. This is just a pair of the museum trams that we had out on its own. It was just a lucky catch. A couple of us went out to the Motol depot to see what we could see. Originally, this was the terminal, and it got extended further west. Could have been in the 1990s, possibly the late 80s. On our own, asking permission, they let us march around the depot. Nothing short of amazing. I can't imagine that here. Could not resist this. It's interesting that so many of the T6s were laid up in the midday when they're running T3s outside. I'm wondering if the newer T6s were just not as reliable. I mean, maybe one of you guys could enlighten me on that. And there they are again, running around the streets. This is looking north. The Vltava River is just to the left of those trees. There are tracks that cross here in the foreground that go over the river. Matter of fact, that previous picture is looking to the right down that side street. The building on the right with the red awnings is covering the very, very famous Slavia Cafe, where the elite meet to eat. This is heading south from that location along the east side of the river. Actually, I take that back. We're walking north. We're walking north up the river. Probably everybody has heard of the Charles Bridge. It's very, very old, 1357. It's looking down one of the, I guess, canal from the Charles Bridge. When we were there in 2003, that was only a couple of months after Prague had some severe flooding. As a matter of fact, the entire metro either had just gotten back into service or wasn't yet completely back into service. But I think on some of those, you can see some of the watermarks. This is on the west side of the river, south of the castle. There's just a couple of famous spots around Malostranské Square that the trams go through. This is one of those famous spots. It's a gauntlet track through the building. This is on the other side of that building. The building on the left is the St. Thomas Brew House. It's only from 1352. They don't brew beer there anymore. The beer is brewed in another brewery south of the city in Brno, on the south side of the city in Brno. But they still have the restaurant and serve the beer, and it's highly recommended. That's looking at the view of the gauntlet track under the building. The next day, May 22nd, and this was our fan trip in Liberec. Liberec has a small local tramway, and one of the lines is basically an interurban. So the car on the left, the T3, the Route 11 goes to Jablonec nad Nisou, which just means Jablonec on the Nisou River. On the right is one of their operating T2s that was our fan trip cars. This is at their big interchange in downtown Fugnirova. Liberec is a meter gauge system, as you can see here. And this was coming off of a little either single track or gauntlet. I forget which. But we're on the Route 11 out to Jablonec. Single track passing sidings, rural, as you can see. Very, very lovely operation. Another T2 operating in regular service. And it's only 42 years old. In addition to that meet, the regular service caught up in back of us. So we had to get our pictures and hustle. And that's all the way down. This is southeast of Liberec, the town of Jablonec. Regular service. Another meet with regular service. Pose shot under the railway. Yeah, how did a stop like that get a name, viaduct? Ooh, I don't know. There was a short turn loop there where we got out of the way. Then we had this beautiful single truck motor, Ringhofer from 1929. This originally came from Ústí nad Labem, elsewhere in the Republic. This is at the depot. Oh, that's right. The funny thing about Liberec is it's dual gauge. The city system, which is only about 3 or 4 lines, is standard gauge. The interurban is meter gauge. So you can see here the dual gauge trackage. And there's a specimen of it on the right. Regular service on the 2 route and our car. Regular service with T2s. They didn't have a lot of them. They had about maybe 10, something like that. But the fact that they were still running in 2003. And those were the only T2s left in regular service, apparently anywhere. Back downtown, you can see the dual gauge trackage. I forgot to mention that earlier. And of course, we get to march around the car barn. My favorite advertising car. Work car with a plow if it needs to. Back downtown at the main interchange place. Same location, looking the other way. More T2s coming in from the interurban line. This is outside the railway station. So what do you do after a long day's fan trip riding? You snooze. What else? The late John Pappas was busy taking notes. On our way back, we were stopped here in Turnov, and because the window's open, it's very easy to get, you don't have to take pictures through the window. You can just open the window. This was a Czech version of a RDC. Actually, an RDC2. The following day, May 23rd, we're back at the main railway station. Another one of those 1957 vintage Type 30E electrics. Much better paint scheme though, paint job. This day we went to Ostrava. This particular system map is only tramways. How wonderful. So we get off the train and the first thing we see is a pair of T6s that were only 8 years old. And then along comes a pair of rebuilt T3s. And our fan trip car. This is what you saw on the meeting notice. This was the only T1 that we rode anywhere, although Prague has one. This is an early one from 1957. Like I mentioned before, the T1 was Tatra's first model of PCC, and this really is an honest-to-God actual PCC. Not built under license, they just copied it and then made many thousands of PCCs. Here we are at the Bechyně station. How do you not like this car? And this is the picture that you saw on the meeting notice. At the end of the line, Zaberge. Nice outdoor cafe right next to the loop. Regular service. Regular service coming in. The loop is just off to the right. We were headed back in, but at this photo stop, there was regular service coming out. How do you not photograph it? Another pair of T3s that were originally built for the Soviet Union ended up here. Very industrial area. You always shoot regular service when you can at photo stops. Single track portion of the 5 routes. Start of the road into urban. Single track, passing sidings. There's our group. Dave Shore, Judy and Bob Matten, Charlie Akins, Jim Mattina, Harold Galt, Dennis Furbish, Ben Muckenhaupt, and others. Sadly, some are no longer with us. In the afternoon, they gave us this 1922 car built by SMMD, which is a long, confusing name. But they had other museum cars. And in this depot, workshops, Inicon is assembling brand new trios. So they were about to get brand new equipment. And of course, we have some Inicons in this country. I think Portland streetcar may have Inicon trios. Carl or one of the others can correct me on that. So there's a brand new trio and a 6-year-old T6. It's a shame that their T2 was not yet ready for prime time. Give us all the more reason to go back and visit again. Ah, and there's one of the K2s with the corrugated sides, fluted sides. According to the data that I found, this car is only from 1952, although it looks way, way older. So they actually had, for such a small system, they had quite an assortment. On the left, 1952 car, motor and trailer, which you can't see. The brown and green car is from 1919. Its trailer is from 1933. And the black and white car is from 51. And I'm not sure of the date of the trailer. I could not find any data on it. Oh, 1899, the trailer. Ancient. Oh, and there's Harold Golk on the left. There's our T1 being put away. And while we're there, we got a little more regular service. Well, we were riding the 1922 motor. I guess Barborka is a bit of a nickname for the car. More regular service. Next day is May 24th, so it's time for more Prague trips. We started off in the morning with a very nicely matched pair of Ringhofers from 1908 and 1909. Brusnice is just north of the castle on the west side of the river. Very nicely manicured right-of-way. Nobody got in anybody's way. Back downtown. I forget whether this is a full Grand Union or just partial. Ipe Pavlova. Not to be confused with Palmovka on the other side of the river. We pulled into the Pankratz depot. Then we headed back out. That view that we saw right near the river several frames ago, this is looking down that street to the right. Just off to the right on the south side of the street, there's a really, really wonderful brew pub called Pivovarsky Dom. So you could sit there and have extremely fresh, delicious beer, fantastic food, and watch lots and lots of trams go by the windows. Back at Stressovice Depot, it's a grueling grueling day. Nothing like riding trams all day to really wear you out. This is coming down the hill from the castle on the west side of the river. Around the bend to the right in the background is that building where the tracks go into a gauntlet and go underneath it. Everywhere you go, virtually everywhere you go in Prague, so long as it's not, the new suburbs, is extremely photogenic. I mean, just look at the architecture. Another big wide boulevard with private right-of-way, because that's the way you're supposed to do it. This is way on the west side of the city. Jeppy is the name of the neighborhood. A lot of the communist era apartment blocks. But unlike here, where we build Co-op City and Spring Creek, without decent public transit, they build apartment blocks and the tramway is built at the same time. This commentary brought to you by more regular service with newer equipment, only 7 years old. I think this is the sports complex on the southeast side of the city, Spojovací. Szpitalska, which sounds like it's a hospital. Rosmajerovo Square. The castle is up the hill to the right of this view. Coming back down the hill, there's this long, it's like a horseshoe curve, actually. This is one of the many bridges over the Vltava River. So this is basically looking north. Downtown is in back of us. Speaking of downtown. Oh, and we've changed equipment again. So now we've got the 1915 motor with the 1942 trailer. At Kobylisy Depot, as usual, we get to roam all over the place. There's a sea of T3s here. Mostly unmodified. No electronic signs, no chopper controls that I'm aware of. Plus the fact that they're still in the 6000 series numbers kind of tells me that they're original, unrebuilt. Nice thing about these tram depots is there's so much daylight that comes in. Skylights. Back out on the road. Nice quiet street out in the burbs. At the end of the line for the 10 and the 24. Jablitse. The now familiar apartment blocks. Back out on the boulevard, Once again, typical private right-of-way. Though usable by emergency vehicles because it's paved. Yeah, once you get out of downtown, the old areas, there's lots of new architecture. This is on the north side of the river. Holešovice is one of the three main railroad stations. Of course, Hlavní nádraží is the main station, but Holešovice and Marisakovo on the east side of downtown, those are the two substations, so to speak. The terminal at Vistaviste or Vistaviste. Outside that loop. Regular service, of course. And at the end of the trip, we actually got to ride this little beastie. I believe that is their one and only T4, originally built for Yugoslavia somewhere, now back in Prague. Well, originally from Beograd, like it says. I don't know if all the T4s had fluted sides, but it's, I guess, an improvement on the T3. As you can see, it looks very much like a T3. That's the third station, Masarikovo. That's a much smaller station, but notice the glass train shed on the right. Stop known as Strasnitska. At Hostivar station. Same location on the loops, where we were once again able to get out of the way of regular service. Back out on the road. Way on the east side of town, Levskeho. We got to see some of their KT-8s in action. Same location on the loop. This is just on the east side of the river, looking east towards downtown. That might be the Opera House in the background. And back at Strasovice Depot, which I believe is the end of that day's trips. And that is it. Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Das ist alles.
Yeah, let me allow everyone to unmute. All right. So if you'd like to unmute, you can. And if anyone has any questions or comments for Jeff on that fantastic presentation, fire away.
Interesting show, Jeff.
Thank you.
I had been there a number of years ago. A lot of years ago. Hey,
It's a
what's the
hard
deal
place not to
now?
like.
Some of the members ask about why we couldn't have that earlier 15 minutes for chatting. Is that by accident or this is some rule change?
It's unfortunately, we've changed the security settings for the Zoom account, and it just makes it a little easier if we don't. But I'll bring that back and see if we can set that up again for next month.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Jeff,
Yo,
I'm curious as to how you did all your research on the different models of rolling stock.
I have a book that's a guide to tramway systems of the Czech Republic that I got many, many years ago. So that gave me the basic info on, builders dates. If I was lucky, the class. Prague does have class or type numbers for their trams. Lots of other systems don't. Although I just found recently a German website that was devoted to Prague. What I need to find, though, is a website or a book that gives us the history of the tram routes themselves. Because I found myself needing to look up, on a particular route, what was its terminals or, stuff like that.
And that book you talked about was in English?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I probably got it from LRTA over in England. Forgive
I was
me.
thinking if anyone might have a book like that, it would be LRTA, by Route Guide.
Yeah.
There are a variety of books available in multiple languages, hardbound, softbound, large and small format. I was researching Tatras, and I'm surely not an expert, but I was just trying to figure out everything. And some people, I have models too. So we were discussing all the different types and the corrugations and non-corrugated cars. I think that last car, the blue and cream car, I think that was purely a sightseeing car. I believe it does not have rear doors. And I think that car that's a difference between the others. It had a sister car. The sister car, I don't know if that had rear doors. One had a sun on the front. The other had a moon, partial.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they really are. Just trying to keep track of everything is daunting, because as many PCCs as we had, they had 14,000 of one type of Tatra, and many more of, a whole bunch of other things.
Thanks, Edward.
Yeah, I was in Prague for a few days. I was very lucky on a trip. It is truly a great place to go visit.
Oh, yeah.
The architecture along the river.
Yes.
You had mentioned a couple photos there. All those apartment buildings have facades that are just great. I mean, you could do a study of just the doors on the buildings.
Yep.
As an interesting subset of your photos. And then, of course, the dancing building is up the street there now.
Yep. Yeah.
Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. I was looking at some photos of Prague that I had downloaded from the Eurotram's list server 10 years ago by a British photographer, Peter Mackinson. And this morning, today, I was finding the exact locations to the street intersection. And these were pictures from 1972 and 73. And it's unchanged. It's just unchanged. Yeah, I can hardly wait to go back someday.
if anyone would care to share the books, if there's a place where we could put some of the information or just share emails, I can go and take photos of some of the book covers and stuff like that, or type out a list or something. Taking photos would be easier.
Please do.
Yeah, if somehow we can get, I don't know everyone's emails, or does ERA have an email list?
You can do it through the ERA website, contact
Okay.
us.
Okay,
Whenever you contact the ERA, I get notified, and 2 or 3 other guys get notified automatically.
We also have the email addresses of all of the participants in today's meeting, so we could potentially send a list out to all the participants.
yeah, the models or the Tatras are really fascinating. There's a lot of interesting stuff, like when you had a photo there on the bridge on the north side of downtown,
Oh, most.
and the points up at the intersection there are at least a whole car length back from the intersection
Yep.
at that one particular location, so that when the cars are going to turn, they actually turn off the right-hand track to make a left-hand turn, a whole car length well behind.
Fascinating system.
Going up to the castle, you said a U-bend. I think there's 2, because I think you go up and then you turn to the right, you go up farther, and then you turn to the left, and then you climb up the hill.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one person commented they thought it was kind of like visiting Pittsburgh in some ways,
Right.
at least with some of the feel, not necessarily not the architecture, but the feel anyway.
Right. Exactly. It's quite the place. Matter of fact, I'm going to share screen again, and I'm going to show you all that spot. There it is. That's that horseshoe curve on the tramway. And the castle is just to the left. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Okay, now I understand, about that second turn.
Yeah.
I was riding a car at the time. I was kind of losing track of geography. But yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, the big loop up on the upper turn.
Yeah.
And then if you go further down, you can see where the gauntlet track is in front of that cathedral.
Well, there's the gauntlet
right
track
there.
under the building, right there.
Yeah.
Right, and there's
That's a nice spot because it stops right in front of the cathedral.
Yep.
And there's a bathroom across the street down in the basement, public toilets.
Yeah, that's just one of those unforgettable spots, locations. It's just.
Oh yeah. And they stay there for a while because I took a photo of the circular decal logo on the side of the car, which is very elaborate.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, we've gotten a tremendous amount of positive reaction in the chat to your presentation. A lot of
Oh, good. Now I don't have to go kill myself.
that's good. So a lot of folks pleased, and we'll have all the chat recorded, so we can send that to you, Jeff, so you can read it at your leisure when you're not trying to focus on the program.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Did we used to have these meetings on Thursdays?
Yeah, so the meeting this month was on a different day than normal because of the various holidays in April that conflict.
Okay, it ended up that tonight's also the CERA Zoom.
Yeah, it was kind of an unavoidable conflict, unfortunately.
I just asked. I'm not complaining. But,
no, you're right, and we talked about that. Unfortunately, it was kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, but great presentation.
Yeah, one option for people, not me, was to do the CERA meeting and then see the recording of this one. I I did not have that luxury.
Yeah, I wondered which one to watch, and this one starts a half hour sooner.
Ah,
And,
okay.
I know that Harvey Lanner does not record any of his shows.
Right.
In fact, I was talking to him today because I asked him, are you going to allow a recording? And he's actually accommodating to set up separate Zoom calls to see his presentations at other times. He basically turns it on and walks away. You can watch it.
He's doing the ERA presentation next month.
Ah,
Oh, by the way,
on.
so next month's meeting is going to be a Midwest traction review.
Okay.
I believe it's, if not mostly, almost entirely film, videos, movies.
Yeah. Which should be interesting.
That should be good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint everybody that this did not go until midnight.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff on his great presentation?
Well, I'm also going to say excellent presentation, very well researched with really amazing photographs.
Oh, and thank you for the note, Alan.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jeff, I do have a couple of questions I posted on the chat. Are the brakes on the railroad cars still the old vacuum brakes, or are they using air brakes now?
I would think, I have no idea.
I know when I was in Ireland in 1975, the mainline trains still had vacuum brakes on them.
Those old cars that we rode from Tabor back up to Jovice may have had vacuum brakes. Good question.
There was also a shot of the metro
Yep.
that you showed. Was that underrunning third rail in that one?
That's a good question.
It looked like it from the photo, but it was hard to tell.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and find it. Hey, you guys keep talking in the meantime. Where the hell was it? Ah, found it. It is underrunning third rail, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
Any additional questions or comments for Jeff? Oh, Paul Gakowski, I see you asking a question, but you're muted. Let me, you should have a prompt now. You should be able to unmute. No, you're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, here we go. Jeff, it was a great show, but I missed the very beginning. What's the current fleet composition? Denise and I were there, lucky enough to be there, sort of, when they were just bringing their first low floor cars into the city. Are there, how many Tatras are left, if any? And also, is it mostly all low floor cars, or what's the current situation?
I think it's probably mostly low floor now, but mostly could be only 51%. From all the street views that you see in Google Street View, and there are views certainly up to 2019, possibly 2020 around town. There were still T3s running in 2019, which is mind-boggling as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But then again, so many of their T3s have been rebuilt several times.
Yeah.
You know, the electronic signs, the chopper controls, the air conditioners, what have you. I thought I had heard that the T6s were out of service, even though their T3's still running. So that may lend some credence to my hypothesis about all those T6 that we saw in the depot laid up in the midday, why they weren't running. Maybe they just weren't as reliable as the T3s. But there's a couple of different, I think, Skoda low floor cars, 14 Ts, 15 Ts, I forget. I don't know if the KT8s are still running, the articulateds. The Urban Electric website that one of our members, Yuri Maller, manages is a very good resource. It's a car-by-car roster of planet Earth. If there is a tramway or subway or trolley bus anywhere in the world, they have the data for it, generally speaking. So if you go to Prague on their website, and I believe it's transphoto.org, I think. Just go to Prague and you'll see what's still running.
Yeah, I think somebody posted that website on the chats earlier this evening, so I think it's there.
It was me.
Thank you, Gregory.
Okay, this is really encyclopedia, and all you tell is trust about transport. And by the way, there is a network of similar website like Photobus, like rail pictures, and about, and even they have even fleet photo, even house photo. That's a Russian team which makes websites. They have absolutely everything. And Prague is really something a must for rail fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also know that on YouTube there's a lot of Prague tram videos showing the newer stuff, cars in the 9300s, 9400s. I don't know exactly what models they are, but YouTube would be a great resource. Just search Prague trams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
It was a great show and wonderful
Thank you.
photos. Do you think there might be a tourist attraction to the T3s because they're more recognizable than the T6s?
Maybe.
Just like old PCCs in America.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question.
They are good looking.
I think so. I've never met a PCC I didn't like. For any of you that were on the next ERA tour to Europe, which was 2006, that went to Poland, and I did a presentation on that a couple of years ago. At the time, Poland was rabid with PCCs made by Konstal. And I'm sure they're still running, it's just, like everywhere else, not as many.
Hey, Jeff, I got a quick question.
Yes.
At the very beginning, I only caught this partially because I was running in and out of the kitchen, but at the first depot you guys visited, there was, what was that very attractive red vehicle? I couldn't tell if it was a local or the first car of an EMU. And it almost looked like slightly wide, like it almost had like a Berlin S-Bahn look to it, the way it was chamfered into corners. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, but you said this was near the beginning?
Near the beginning. It may have been the first depot you guys were at. But I think it was mainline trains. I don't think it was a tram depot.
We didn't do any mainline tram.
Oh, okay. But this definitely, the vehicle was too big to be a tram, but it appeared to be at a depot and not a station. It was like on
Oh, was it the red one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was the Bechynie Railway. That was that.
No, it was right before that. That was attractive too. The slide right before that. No, keep going, keep going. Sure, maybe it was in the other direction. That, yes.
That is that same car.
It is?
Yeah, that is that.
Oh, it looks, okay. That's interesting. The okay, when you're looking at it head on, you don't see the slight inclined angle in the front, yeah, you see how it's got a slight inclined nose, very slight.
It's not. This is a wide angle lens.
Oh, okay, then that's what it is. Okay,
Yeah.
but it is quite wide in the front, isn't it?
It's normal width.
Okay, maybe it's the cross section. It almost gives it a bit of a rectangular look, but it could be the lens. Then again, how old is that? How old is that unit?
1903.
Oh my, it's beautiful.
It's from the original electrification.
Okay, well, that's a beautiful.
100 years old then.
And it's still in operating condition.
Knock wood.
Okay.
Someday when we have to go back, we'll have to go search it out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go back to Prague. I was only there once in 1993.
Yeah, I was only there twice or 3 times.
Yeah.
You can't get enough, really.
Jeff, you mentioned that the T6s were unreliable. What was wrong?
I'm just conjecturing.
What could have been wrong with it?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's just that it was so surprising, Robert, to see so many T6, the newer cars, much newer cars from the 1990s, laid up with the T3s from the 60s and the 70s, running around all day.
Oh, I see. I always thought they were a nice looking car.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I totally agree.
Were they PCCs also?
I believe so.
Okay.
But, the experts out there like Carl can correct me if I'm wrong.
Jeff, it could be possible that the newer cars have certain electronic components that aren't quite as reliable as the older cars. Remember when the T8 first got the R44s?
Absolutely.
When one broke down, you couldn't get it to move for love or money.
Absolutely, you're correct. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff? Well, Jeff, I think I speak for everyone when I say that, again, this was fantastic. I know I really enjoyed this. And I saw some comments in the chat that it's giving some folks the inspiration to start thinking of international travel again. So that's good. So yeah, I think with that, I think we're ready to sign off for the evening. Again, those of you that are still on, thanks for sticking it out with us all the way till the very end. And thanks again to Jeff, and we'll see you again in May for our next presentation. And be sure to stay tuned to erausa.org for all the latest updates. So take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Great show. Thank you, everybody.
Great show. So long, Jeff.